I'm Dr. Bill Sodeman, and welcome to The Perfect Route. Today's episode features Christa Novelli, who's the Director of Clinical Training and Development at Array Behavioral Care. And we've got an interesting conversation for you today about everything from AI and employee orientation to the role of knowledge management and systems thinking in improving the overall employee experience, especially for new hires. So here we go on The Perfect Route. Hi there. It's an honor to have Christa Novelli with us today. She's certainly got a lot of experience and some interesting perspectives on corporate learning and development. So we are pleased to have you here. Welcome, Christa.
Be here.
Excellent. Let's get started at the beginning. What first drew you into the world of learning and development, and how has your perspective on its role evolved over time?
Yeah, I think like a lot of people in this field, I wound up coming into learning and development a little bit circuitously. Fortunately, I think for me, a lot of my background and education really did translate nicely. So I started out in the world of public health. I got a master's in public health with a health education focus, and I took literally every elective I could in the statistics and research methods area because I love analysis. I did work for a while in traditional public health education and then wound up spending over a decade working for my large local healthcare system in our clinical education department. And from there, segued into corporate learning and development and have come full circle where I'm again working in healthcare and behavioral healthcare at this point. What really interested me initially, so what drew me into public health was that it was looking at well-being of entire communities and behavioral change, and it had that cross-functional collaboration with a lot of community anchors. It wasn't just about looking at an individual, it was looking at an entire system. And I find that corporate learning and development, when it's done right, also focuses on those same things. It's not just looking at putting out content, it's looking at solving business problems and collaborating to be a business function. So from there, I'd say really I've been in every role in learning. I've been a trainer, I've managed trainers, I've implemented LMSs and administered them. I've been an instructional designer. As I moved into management and then into my now director role, I think it's become more important over time that I have focused more on that cross-functional collaboration and business problem solving. I think learning and development really has the potential to partner on everything from retention to employee growth to a variety of business issues. And those functions or those learning and development departments that are solely focused on being content factories, I see are being at greater risk of being downsized because they just don't offer as much value to the organization.
And the prominence of generative AI is also another risk to those content factories.
Yes.
It's tempting for leadership to say, "Oh, we can use this feature in our LMS or LXP, or outsource it to a low-cost provider that uses AI." But do you feel that this affects the quality of the content in some ways?
I think it really does because it isn't just solely about prettying up slides or information transfer. I think that's something that I have seen a lot of, and it's something that I just started with my company a year and a half ago, and that I've really been trying to do as a systemic change is that learning is not just an information transfer function. And when you're just looking at generative AI, you're basically taking information and saying, turn this into some sort of a training, where I'm looking more at starting at that high level of what is the business goal here? What do we need people to do? What are the barriers to doing it? And sometimes what learning and development winds up delivering isn't even training. It's something else. Like, if you've got a problem with your application that you're using, I could train you to work around it, but it would be far better if we could dig into can we actually fix the problem? And that's where I think I view learning as being a lot broader than just generating content.
that collaboration piece is so important, and you mentioned it just now and earlier. And I'm a former CIO. I've got my doctorate in information systems, so I'm especially sensitive to um, software usability issues.
Yeah.
And that's a great point. It seems like an opportunity to partner with IT and address the root issue rather than, as you put it, do those workarounds, which will get work done, but it may not be a viable solution in the long run.
Yeah, definitely. And IT definitely is one of our key business partners, as is our people operations team and our clinical leadership, because I am working for a clinical company. But there are really various parts of the business where we can dig deeper into that needs analysis as opposed to just saying, give me your content and I can make training out of it. Excuse me, my throat.
Yeah, and that goes back to your earlier point about content factories. If
Mhm.
the content itself is based on assumptions or expedience, then something's going to suffer, and it's usually the user's learning and engagement in that learning event or opportunity, whether it's classroom, hybrid, or online.
Yeah, I think that's where all of those old adages come from on the penny wise, pound foolish. I can do something very quick, and it might be cheaper in the short term, but it's going to cost more in the long term because it isn't really solving your problem.
And as we were talking, the example that came to my mind as I was trying to visualize a situation where a workaround is necessary is electronic health record systems.
Yes.
A prime candidate for workaround, especially with the pressure to get data into those systems and also extract data and reports out of those systems. With time pressure, it's really easy to satisfy and take the most convenient available option that gets the job done.
Yeah. Really funny that you mentioned electronic health records. We've been implementing Epic, which is a big EHR that virtually everybody in the healthcare space has heard of. We implemented it for part of our business at the end of last year in 2024. 2020, yes, 2024. And we're implementing it for the other portion of the business here later this year. And my team has been heavily involved. I just met with one of our clinical leaders and one of the people on the education team earlier today. And they were saying just the questions we're asking sometimes help them think about things through another vein as well. And we really are trying to work as an entire system together, as opposed to having everybody just siloed looking at it through the clinical lens, the IT lens, the learning lens. And that synergy really is leading to a lot of great solutions where we're trying to build something that is going to work for our clinicians. Because ultimately, the focus is how do I make your job easier, not just how do I give you information.
And making the job easier and actually improving the effectiveness of the learner's performance are goals that every learning and development department should have. Um, EHR implementations are legendary for their difficulty and all the incredible opportunities for improvement that come along with them. Um, well,
Yeah, I think
that's
any system implementation, I've implemented LMSs before too, and I always say any of those applications are like marrying somebody. There's going to be something wrong with all of them. Can I live with what's wrong with you? Can you live with what's wrong with me? And the systems, though, what we can do though is make them the best that we can. And the more you do have that cross-functional collaboration in the implementation, you have questions being asked and perspectives being considered that hopefully lead to a better end product.
and the quality of that end product is so important, and learning and development, it seems to me, plays a key role in collecting stakeholder information as well as you know helping that cycle of continuous improvement continue to spin.
Mhm. Yeah, I worked with a prior company heavily with our sales team, and they used to refer to the voice of the customer. And in the case of learning and development, our customer are our employees. And I do feel like we play a key role in bringing that voice of the customer back to various teams that we're working with, and hopefully, again, leading to better outcomes for everybody and making everybody's jobs easier to do.
Those are excellent points. Thanks for sharing those, Krista. Um, and this may our discussion may dovetail into my next question about, a recent initiative that you could share that you think truly captured the strategic potential of L&D inside your company. Um, how well did it work and what made it work?
Yeah, I think the collaboration we were talking about does lead into an initiative that I've been working on for some time, which is it's an onboarding process for our clinicians. We call it NCO, New Clinician Orientation. So I started with Array in May of 2024. Shortly before I started, they had revised NCO. And the team that was working on it generally did have an idea of what they needed to include. So they went to each of the departments and said, quality team, what do you need? Clinical leadership, what do you need? People operations, what do you need? And electronic health records, again. And they just compiled it into a very long slide deck that was primarily read to people over the course of several days. And the asynchronous content for the LMS was also updated, but again, it was very focused on information transfer. And we really took a different look at this. So I got an entire core team together with help from my implementations team, who has been doing a phenomenal job helping project manage this. And we've had weekly meetings for several months where we've been working on, let's start again at the high level of business goals. What are we trying to accomplish with NCO? We're trying to reduce turnover, we'll say. We're trying to decrease time to productivity, those common types of things that you're always looking for in orientation. And then step down to what are our terminal learning objectives for the clinicians. So those might look like things like we want somebody to be able to independently manage their caseload in the EHR. And I then mapped that to everything that we did. So it wasn't just about we need a quality session. It was if quality is part of our goal or our terminal objectives, how do we build it foundationally and then map it through every single thing we're doing? I think it really worked very well, one, because of the collaboration, and two, because we changed very much from that information transfer to an application and to more of those facilitated conversations. We got a lot of investment. I have everybody from our vice president of therapy and quality on down facilitating these conversations. Our VP of therapy and quality every week or every other week is in there meeting individually with these new clinicians. And instead of having a bunch of slides, she's got a checklist that, yes, you need to cover this, but here's things you also need to ask them. So it is more of a back and forth conversation that uncovers change management needs, helps figure out, what people are coming to us with and how that can fit into what we're asking them to do as part of our practice. And again, kind of hearkening back to that, you want to put more investment up front and it saves you in the long run. We really have noticed how we're getting to know people sooner, people that we might have taken months to get to the point of knowing them or meeting them in those first couple days and having them really build those relationships. We've also had a lot of feedback from the clinicians, and because we are wanting to listen to the voice of our customers, we're making continual changes, and we're segueing this into a bigger project that's going to be the full clinician journey from the time we interview you to your first couple months. So it just has become a lot broader than just this little siloed, targeted approach to something that is more systemic.
And that's a great approach to the challenges of not only bringing new hires, especially professional hires, through the orientation process, but having multiple touch points, in your case, the first 60 days, so that as they've got questions, there are channels for these new hires to pursue those questions other than, informal networks, which they may not have formed yet on the job. there's always that difference between tacit knowledge and explicit knowledge that we need to manage. And that orientation period is a mix of both. A lot of tacit knowledge up front, and then the explicit knowledge starts exposing itself as that new hire gets deeper into their new job role. Um, so I was heartened both by your approach to knowledge management and to stakeholder management as well, because new hires are stakeholders from day one, and they need a lot of things in order to be successful.
Yeah, and I think we are also to that end. Our business is complex. We have clinicians who partner with healthcare systems and are licensed in sometimes up to 10 or more states. They see patients in healthcare facilities, a number of different healthcare facilities in every one of those states, and they have to log into the EHR for every one of those healthcare facilities. There's just a tremendous amount of information that we could just, here's all the info, but nobody is going to remember that. We have incredibly smart physicians, but again, nobody can remember that much stuff. So we are focusing more on how do we set people up to drive them to their resources? So rather than saying, let me tell you all about this stuff or even practice, which is better, it still is just too much information. So it's more share your screen. Let's pull this up. Let me show you how to bookmark this site and have you build that knowledge bank so you know what's there when you need it, as opposed to trying to just absorb everything all in a couple days.
And as you were talking, the big thing that came to mind to me was sense making, trying to come to grips with a new environment, new systems, new policies and procedures. It is a lot. And it's not surprising that in some job roles we see tremendous turnover just because of that fire hose of information that's coming right at a new employee. I've been through periods like that myself, and it just gets compounded if you've got an employee who's just moved to the area, or they've got some other significant life change beyond the job starting. Emotionally can be taxing, and that also affects your physical and mental state as well. I mean, it makes it more difficult to learn, I would think.
Yeah, and exactly. And I think that's exactly why we're expanding it to that broader, your journey from the time we're interviewing you to your first 30, 60, 90 days, because that fire hose isn't just your first couple days. Emails you're getting ahead of time, especially as we're dealing with clinicians that need to be credentialed and privileged in multiple sites. We're looking at everything from how many emails are we sending you? Where are they coming from? Just that entire systemic architecture to make this as smooth as we can. And it is still a work in process, but it's something that really my all the way up to the C-suite, there is a deep commitment to this because we really want to do the right thing. We are a behavioral health company ourselves. To your point, it can be an impact on your individual behavioral health, and we want to walk the talk. Our employees' behavioral health, mental health matters too.
And that's so important to remember. And my experience was with employee orientation and training certainly didn't acknowledge mental health at all, and sometimes didn't acknowledge physical health. It would be long days. I remember some of the trainings that involved physical skills. By the end of the day, I was worn out.
Yeah.
And the more tired you get, the less likely you are to learn. Um, that's a great perspective, and thanks for sharing that. Um, that plays into our next question about accessibility. What do you do to make sure that learning is accessible, engaging, and relevant across different teams, levels, and locations?
Yeah, and thinking about that, we are a fully remote company. We have clinicians in every state in the US. We see patients everywhere in the US again. And so I feel like we really had to get good at virtual training sooner than other people did. I think as we all saw during the COVID pandemic, everything shifted really fast to, okay, we're doing this all online. And what I saw a lot of, because I was not with Array at that time, was people trying to replicate exactly what they did in a live in-person classroom and just making it virtual. I had somebody ask me about, with software training, is there a platform like Zoom or Teams where I can get 8 people sharing their screen all at the same time? Because I'm used to doing that in the classroom, which is legitimate if you're teaching software. You walk around the classroom, you look at everybody's screens. And I initially started looking into that, and then I thought, wait, is there a reason you really need 8 screens being shared at the same time? And really, in terms of making things accessible to people virtually, I am trying to really get people to employ best practices for VILT, virtual instructor led training. So the benefit is with us having so many clinicians on staff is that behavioral health clinicians are inherently good at facilitating conversations. They don't get on a therapy session and just talk at somebody, or they wouldn't be good at their jobs. And so they do have that skill set already when we do have them helping lead sessions, that they are able to have it be more of that conversational and hands-on practice action items. So we really are trying to move in that area where we are delving into more meaningful practice and application. Like I mentioned earlier, sometimes it's the solving the issues that are not traditional training. And everybody in L&D is familiar with ADDIE. What I've seen in years past is the big heavy focus in the middle of ADDIE, mostly the development and the implementation. I'm trying to focus on the bookends, especially the analysis and the evaluation would be, I'm analyzing what I want to evaluate. And so I'm kind of looking at what do people need to do? Why do they need to do it? And what is their barrier to doing it? And if you really hit on those points in your training where it's something that is, you need to do this for your job for this reason, and I recognize this is standing in your way, and I'm actually going to try to fix that. It does tend to make it inherently more relevant for people. It hits on those, Malcolm Knowles' adult learning theory on relevance for an adult. The accessibility part, I would say, is something that is a work in progress for us. I think it's easy for people just to fall into I put closed captions on things, it's now accessible. We are obviously closed captioning, but I've also got an internal SharePoint page for my team that we are using to compile resources for ourselves. We've got an accessible learning design page and a visual design page, and we have, contrast checkers, readability formulas, keyboard navigation compliance tools. And it's something that, as a newer department, we're trying to build in up front, but I will admit it's something that we've got more work to do on.
That's good to hear, that you're using so many different tools to support accessibility. During the pandemic, it really went back of mind for many departments in that rush to get content up. And you're also right, much of that content just replicated what was happening in a classroom, or sometimes I saw live Zoom sessions being recorded, and that 1 or 2 hour training was what was placed on the LMS.
I even
You
saw
know,
people pulling up e-learnings and like, we're going to do this e-learning together. I'm clicking the next button and we're all listening to it talk to us. So yeah.
my goodness, that seems so meta to me.
Yeah.
We're watching somebody watching a training. And it reminds me a little bit of Mystery Science 3 Theater 3000, where we're watching somebody watch a movie.
Yeah.
If you're cracking jokes in it, it's all fun. But if you're trying to learn, maybe not so fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. And let's move into one more question, and it's about mandatory training needs. I mean, how do you balance those needs with that intense desire to foster creativity and self-directed learning in your organization?
Yeah. I mean, there's always going to be mandatory training in a healthcare organization. It's going to be things like HIPAA. I I'm saying this with a grain of salt, recognizing there's mandatory training, but this seems counterintuitive as a training person, but I honestly usually don't care if people take training. I care if they can do their jobs, and I care if they have the support they need to do those jobs. So, really, my focus tends to be more on what are we doing to support you in doing your job. But taking into account the mandatory training, I am looking at it more through that voice of customer, like I referenced earlier, where if their training is mandatory, there's probably a reason why. When we're looking at HIPAA, there are legal consequences, financial consequences if we violate HIPAA laws. So I try to make sure we're talking to the end users and figuring out what is going to make this relevant for you. Where do you have questions? Where do you need additional resources so that when we're rolling those types of mandatory trainings out, they are not just box checking activities. One thing that comes to mind for me is we use this proprietary care pathways that our clinicians are using. And it's a process they use to ensure that they're delivering the right care to their patients at the right time and the right dose. They do need mandatory training on it because it's proprietary. They need to know what they can share externally and what they can't. And then they also need some self-directed training that they can access at any time so that they can support their practice. So when we look at the mandatory training, rather than just having it be a video that says, this is what proprietary means and you can do this and you can't do that, we tried to build in more realistically, where did you actually have questions about what you can and cannot share, and have it be something that focuses more on that so it really is meeting a need for that. And then when we looked at the self-directed, again, this collaboration comes in. Our marketing team stood up a SharePoint site specifically for these care pathways, and L&D and the clinical teams have been collaborating on it. One of my instructional designers, Melissa Bankson, has been building resource guides, checklists, short videos, and putting that all in there so it's available just in time. Like if you had, a pipe burst, you're going to go to YouTube. You might call a plumber, but if you need to fix it fast, YouTube, how do I turn off the water? Not harkening back to, I think I saw a video on this 6 months ago. So we're trying to do the same thing, is have this knowledge bank available that when you need it, it's clearly organized, structured in bit pieces that here's your tip sheet. Here's a video on that specific topic.
Ooh, the tip sheets and the videos must be a big help, especially with a complex topic like HIPAA, which is its own rabbit hole
Yeah.
of exceptions, pieces that absolutely must be done, and just that mindset of preserving confidentiality and privacy while balancing the needs of the patient or the client. Um, do you have a few quick thoughts about what the future of learning looks like at Array?
The broad vision is that kind of embedded learning is part of the structure of how we operate. I was hired specifically for the clinical part of the house. That was our, big focus is clinician learning and development. And it's because they do want to have that continuous improvement culture. They want to advance the clinical and the leadership skills of clinicians. I am definitely very focused there, but I'm trying to make it a little more strategic. So, for instance, there's continuing education necessary as a medical professional that you need to do. And we had continuing education, but it was more kind of like let's get a group of people together and determine what topic would you like to present on. We'll get CEs for it and do the presentation. And it was valuable, but it didn't have a broader strategy around it. Where we're doing things like we're implementing a new continuing education platform this fall that has just a broader strategy of providing an organized view of all your licensure and what you need to take all in one place, as opposed to waiting for emails from our medical affairs team saying, hey, you need a couple more substance abuse courses and here's one you can take. Just have it all together on one spot. Same thing we're doing from a dashboard standpoint, trying to put together clinician dashboards where, yes, you are going to have to go to a lot of different places, but this is your centralized hub and it points you out to everything that you need to do. And then we're also trying to expand beyond clinicians. So future vision, we want to support our partner support teams. We've got a lot of collective experience and expertise. Array was a pioneer in this industry of virtual behavioral care. So we want to equip our non clinical teams also to translate that clinical expertise to make behavioral health more accessible outside to our partner organizations, things that they are doing, interacting in podcasts like this. So it really is just making it more expansive across the entire enterprise and a little more strategic and organized, so people are not just getting things coming at them from so many different places.
Yes, the organization piece is so essential, especially for sense making, which I mentioned earlier. But just to help the learner believe that there is a deliberate flow and a deliberate purpose to the learning content and modalities that they're presented with. Well, Christa, I wanted to thank you for spending half an hour with us. This was most informative for me, and I hope our viewers get as much or even more out of this conversation as I did today. Thank you for spending time with us today.
Thank you for having me. It's great to talk about the work that we're doing. As I tell people, if I feel anything about something, I feel passionately about it, and I really do feel passionately about learning. It has a lot of potential to make a difference in a business and in the employees' lives at that business.
Well, I totally agree with you. And thanks to everybody who's watching, and we'll see you on our next episode of The Perfect Route.
Thank you.